The latest adventure for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition takes us to the much-loved city of Baldur's Gate. However, the players won't be staying there for too long as they quickly find themselves embroiled in a diabolical plot that takes them down to Avernus. So in this video, we'll take a pretty detailed look and I'll be sharing my thoughts on Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. Hi everybody and welcome. My name is Nate and you are watching WASD20, a channel about tabletop RPGs and fantasy maps. Here we are with Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. I've got both covers here, the regular cover and the alternate cover. On the regular cover here we have the Archduke of Avernus herself, Zariel, reaching for her sword, the god Baal in the background, one of her minions over here. On this cover we have the symbol for Baal, hemmed in by the sword of Zariel there, and on the backside we have Zariel herself. This one is by Hydro74, as most of the alternate covers are. Both really good covers, I think. I don't really have a strong preference either way. So for the first part of my review here, I'm going to keep it spoiler-free. This should be a player-friendly for the most part. I'll be showing a few pages of the book, but as long as you're not zooming in and trying to read those pages, you should be fine, potential players. So, Baldur's Gate, first off. Baldur's Gate is a bustling port city on the Sword Coast. It is off of the Chionthar River. Here's a map of it. This is a nice map by Mike Schley. And the city is pretty full of corruption. There's a lot of crime. A lot of the most powerful leaders are very self-serving. And I've heard it described as the Gotham City of the Sword Coast. Here's a nice picture from the book. Actually, this is from the Baldur's Gate 3 video game trailer. The game is coming sometime soon, I hope. I can't wait. So I thought that was really interesting. They grabbed a screenshot from the trailer for the video game and put it in the book. And I think it works. It looks really nice. So the first chapter does deal with Baldur's Gate. There is also another nearby city that is featured pretty heavily in this adventure. And there's a big poster map included here from Jared Blando that shows the city of Elturel. And I'm not going to show much of the map because that could provide some minor spoilers. But the city of Elturel is a shining jewel, a beacon of purity compared to Baldur's Gate, but something has gone wrong there. Here's a nice little region map, by the way, that shows where Baldur's Gate is and Elturel. And of course, heavily featured in this adventure is the setting of Avernus, which is one of the 9 hells. Yes, in Faerun there are 9 hells. Avernus is the first of them. The adventure has a lot to do with the Blood War, which is the war going on in the 9 hells between demons and devils. Yes, they are different. If you want more detail on the Blood War, I highly recommend checking out Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes. It's a book that came out a little over a year ago now. So obviously, being largely set in one of the 9 hells, this book is pretty dark. There's a lot of really deep evil going on here, and that tone might understandably turn some people away. However, I will say that I think there's a lot of redemption here. I don't think the book here romanticizes hell or demons. They really drive home the point in this section here in the intro, giving some advice to the dungeon master on how to make sure everyone knows that in the 9 hells, everyone's unhappy, everything's awful, Paradise Lost, lots of ideas for the Dungeon Master to really drive home how awful this place is and how much of a corrupting influence it can have, how unpleasant it is to be here. Now, you might have heard that in the 1980s there was this whole satanic panic thing around Dungeons & Dragons, people thinking it was evil. And a book like this can certainly raise some eyebrows, and even in 2019 there are still people who kind of wonder, isn't that game evil based on what they heard back then? So in light of that, I do find it interesting that Wizards of the Coast included a bit more serious disclaimer in this one than they usually have. Normally they're totally hilarious, and this one at least seems to start a little bit more seriously. This adventure is a work of fiction aimed at providing you and your friends with many hours of fantastic entertainment. Although devils in the 9 hells play prominent roles in this story, the evil they represent is meant to be fought and overcome. Wizards of the Coast fully endorses the kicking of evil's butt. Let darkness fall and light prevail. We strongly advise that you do not play this adventure backward, lest Asmodeus appear in a puff of smoke to talk politics, as archfiends are wont to do. So anyway, Gets a little funny there, but also, you know, kind of getting at that idea that, hey, we know this is all about hell, but you're fighting evil here. Still, there are bad choices that the player characters can make throughout this adventure, and the characters can become corrupted and even make deals with devils, so to speak. So I imagine that subject matter or style of play is not for everyone. Still, I kind of came into this adventure a bit lukewarm on the whole idea. I didn't think I wanted to play an adventure in the Nine Hells, but after reading this book, I am really drawn in by the story. I'm really drawn in by the fact that there are so many meaningful choices along the way in this book. There are a lot of branching paths. Although the overall story is pretty linear, it's not a sandbox by any means. There are a lot of meaningful choices along the way that can have various sorts of impacts later on, and the very ending of the book has so many different options for how things could go. There are a lot of ways it can end, depending on how the players approach certain NPCs and monsters, and on some of the choices they make. A couple other notable things here in the book before we get into the more spoilery section is that there is a section called the Baldur's Gate Gazetteer, and this is a section that's pretty big. It's like 50 pages that has all sorts of information on Baldur's Gate itself, neighbors, rivals, government, military, guard reactions, law and order, citizenry, economy and trade. It goes on and on and on. Tons of information, notable NPCs and landmarks, random encounters for the city of Baldur's Gate. There is just a lot of stuff here. It's over 50 pages of information, and it also includes, of course, player backgrounds, which I think is a great inclusion for any adventure book. It just makes it easier for the dungeon master to make sure that the player characters' backstories are coming up in the main story of the book. There's also this section here on dark secrets. So the party itself will actually choose a dark secret. There's this chart for who knows their secret, and then you get to actually choose the secret. Were they part of a conspiracy? Were they party to a murder, a theft, a failed coup? So all of that's really cool and I think makes for a great addition to the book, but you also have this section on infernal war machines. So this is essentially vehicle combat. I've heard it described in this book as Mad Max in hell. You have stats for these various infernal war machines, information for mishaps, repairs, crashing, and various upgrades and variations, and chases. So it's a pretty brief section overall. It's kind of rules light, but I think that's a cool inclusion, and this does look like a part of the game that could be really fun. And I also think that you could kind of reskin this to use with other kinds of vehicles too in different settings. It doesn't have to be infernal war machines. The rules can very easily be used in your homebrew stuff. All right, now we are going to get into the story spoilers here. So if you are a dungeon master or you're someone who doesn't care about spoilers, then please stick around. But if you are planning to play in a campaign of Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus and you're concerned about spoilers, this would be the point to turn off the video. It's a good book, I recommend it. All right, let's continue. So firstly, you've got a pretty good introduction to the adventure, just talking about the basic plot points. And then you also have these boxes here which break each chapter into an even more brief summary, which is really, really handy. You've also got this bit on the adventure background. If you don't know anything about Zariel, Zariel is an angel who came down to the abyss to observe the Blood Wars, was tasked with this by her celestial bosses, but got so invested in what she was seeing and thought that she could make a difference in actually defeating devils and demons, and went to war on the participants of the Blood War and did quite well. But there was a trap. Many of her mortal allies escaped and abandoned her in Avernus, and she ended up being trapped in Avernus and eventually was corrupted, bent the knee to Asmodeus, and basically became now an archdevil. She was now the ruler of Avernus. Now we'll kind of take it chapter by chapter, and I will give a very brief summary. In Baldur's Gate, the players are first enlisted into the Flaming Fist, one of these organizations that's basically the town guard that is kind of corruptible and a bit too heavy-handed. They are tasked with investigating some strange murders that are taking place due to some cultists from three evil gods called the Dead Three. In Baldur's Gate, the players do get deeper and deeper into the plot. There are also lots of refugees who have fled the shining city of El Turel, one of Baldur's Gate's rival cities, and finding that the city of Elturel has fallen. It has actually disappeared. In its place, a mere crater. The players begin to discover that it has actually been sucked down into the Nine Hells. As they find more and more information, they also discover that Baldur's Gate could share the same fate if something is not done. After defeating the cultist and meeting the man responsible for the fall of Elturel, the players end up going to Candlekeep, which is a fortress perched on the spur of a rock overlooking the Sea of Swords. There are people there who can help them get more information about what's going on, people who observe demon and devil activity, and they do end up getting this beautiful map of Avernus. Again, a large poster map for this one. And this one is also by Jared Blando. Just a really cool illustrated map. It's intentionally not very precise in terms of locations and labels. It's meant to be kind of a vague dreamscape. Distances change and everything is fluid and unpredictable. So really, really cool. I will also show you, now that the players are gone, a little more detail on this map of Elturel. You can see that it is actually chained, and it's hanging over the river Styx, basically, about to be pulled into the river. So really nice maps. Jared Blando did an incredible job on these, and it's a great inclusion with the book. The encounter maps, by the way, are done by Dyson Logos, who's done a lot of the encounter maps in some of the recent D&D books, and he's got a nice style. It's very simple. I know some people don't like it because it lacks much color, but they are very easy to read, and I personally do like the style. Getting back to the players' brief stop in Candlekeep, they get a lot of information and a lot of help, and they also get a new companion named Lulu. Lulu is a Hollyphant, a strange kind of flying elephant-like creature. You can see one right here. Lulu is actually a former companion of Zariel, but has lost most of her memories and is going to, over the course of the adventure, slowly start remembering things that can help the players. The players eventually secure passage to the Nine Hells, and their first stop is Elturel. You can see on the map here exactly where they land, and here's a nice picture of Elturel once again chained over the river Styx. This strange device known as the Companion kind of holding Elturel here. In Elturel, the players begin searching for the Grand Duke Uldur Ravengard, who is actually the head of the Flaming Fist in Baldur's Gate, but happened to be in Elturel when it was sucked down. They eventually do find him, and he urges them to free Elturel and gives them some information on how they might go about that. And that does send them to Avernus. You can see that there are some branching paths here in Avernus in Chapter 3, and basically they venture across this wasteland. We get into the whole infernal war machines here as a means of transportation, and the players have to make some choices about who they will approach and what kind of deals they're going to try to make. You can see there's all kinds of interesting characters they run across in Avernus, and at some point here, Lulu actually does remember the sword of Zariel, Zariel's celestial weapon that actually could help free Elturel. Cool art here with the infernal war machines, love that. There's some really dark stuff here that really, again, drives home how awful of a place this is. A lot of suffering, hard to trust anyone. Everyone seems selfish and out to get others. So it's a pretty bleak picture here of Avernus. Chapter 4 then gets into the actual quest for the Sword of Zariel, and the sword is actually kept in what's called the Bleeding Citadel, which is this little slice of heaven kind of sheltering the sword, a celestial bastion that is kind of being pressed down by the forces of hell. Lulu also gives them information that leads them to believe that Zariel can actually be redeemed using her former sword. So that's what I was kind of talking about. Yes, this is dark, but there's this hope. There is the chance of redemption, even for an archdevil like Zariel. But that choice is totally up to the players, and Chapter 5, we really start to see a lot of those choices coming to fruition. Love this art here depicting the fall of Zariel in stained glass. Really, really cool. And Chapter 5 does take us into the escape from Avernus. So, Options. The players can try to confront Zariel, try to convince her to help. They can try to actually redeem Zariel. This is kind of like a tense moment here. There's like, it all comes down to one roll, and there are certain things that the players can do before this point that can make that DC lower, but it comes down to one roll. It's a DC 25 persuasion check. So high stakes and an intense moment for sure. Then there's this bit on Zariel's wrath. If the players do confront Zariel, here are some possible allies they may have gathered along the way, including Tiamat might actually lend them a hand here. If I remember correctly, Tiamat has actually been trapped in Avernus as well. The players could choose to serve Zariel and kind of forfeit their souls. They could choose to join Zariel and actually rule Avernus themselves, which just sounds like a terrible idea because you're immediately going to be making yourselves a target. And it says here, ruling a layer of the Nine Hells as a mortal is effectively impossible. However, Asmodeus admires ambition, and anyway, I won't read all that, but kind of interesting. And then we get into, will Elturel be saved? It's very possible that they will fail and they will not be able to free Elturel from the Nine Hells. Anyway, there's a lot more here, and the point I would just want to reemphasize is that there are a lot of questions that need answering toward the end of this adventure, and there are many different ways those questions can be answered that can make for a very different ending. But either way, the ending is very intense no matter what happens. There's a lot riding on this, and yeah, scenes like this certainly make for an intense ending. So that is my story synopsis. Kind of the big questions are, will Elturel be saved, and what will be Zariel's fate, as well as the fate of the party? Some other information in the back of the book, other than the gazetteer and the info on the infernal war machines, there is this appendix on diabolical deals, which may come in handy as they are in Avernus dealing with lots of diabolical creatures. Then you've got the infernal war machines. Then you've got the magic items. There's, I don't know, somewhere around 12 or maybe 20 magic items here in this book. Some really powerful stuff. And then we've got creatures. These are just the creatures that are not in the monster manual, which is not to say they're all original. It's very nice of them, however, to make sure that all you need is the monster manual and this book. You don't need to also have, like, Out of the Abyss, where some of these monsters do come from, or Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, or Voldo's Guide, or things like that. So there are quite a few various creatures and NPCs here, including some new ones. You got this random Infernal Rapture menu here, both in Infernal and in Common. We've got some story concept art, which I always love these inclusions. It's really cool to see some of the other ideas they had and some of the rough sketches and things like that. Some of the concept art that didn't make it into the book. And lastly, we have this infernal script, the infernal alphabet. The big poster map, by the way, came from right here. It was perforated and you can tear it right out of the back. So that is the book. So all in all, I am pretty impressed with this book here. I came in thinking I probably wasn't gonna like it. It probably wasn't gonna be my thing, but it totally won me over. I found the story really compelling. I thought it was well executed, and I really appreciate that there are many different choices the players can make that will have a meaningful impact on the outcome in the end. I think I forgot to mention that the adventure actually takes the player characters from level 1 to 13 in only about 155 pages, so that is something to note, that I think this is a pretty accelerated pace of leveling up, and there certainly are some instances where you're leveling up pretty quickly because you're facing challenge after challenge after challenge. It's always a bit of a challenge to review these books when you haven't run the adventure, and so I will say that I think probably 5, 6, 7 months from now, when a lot of you have run it, you might have some good input and some good things that you liked and didn't like about it. You notice those things when you actually run the game. There are a lot of things that stick out that don't when you just read it. So, if that's you, comment below. Let me know what you think of this adventure, whether you've just read it, whether you've glanced at it, or whether you've actually run it. Wizards of the Coast is also selling this little set of extra accessories right here, and overall I think my impression is pretty favorable of this so far. I'll probably do some kind of unboxing video over on my Facebook page, so go check it out there, facebook.com/WASD20net. That'll probably be up sometime later this week. Lastly, before we go, I want to give a huge thank you to the WASD20 patrons. These are people who support my channel on a monthly basis. They are the reason I'm able to dedicate several hours each week to reading RPG books, researching new tools to share with you guys, editing videos into the wee hours of the night, and all the things that go into the videos you see here. So thank you so much, patrons. You can join with them too at patreon.com/WASD20, and there's some pretty cool rewards as well. All right, that's going to do it for this one, everybody. Comments, questions, leave them down below. Take care. You'll see me again very soon.